Ahoy hoy! Today we're going to talk about dry brushing. Two of these terrain pieces are exactly the same. Alright, on the right side we've got Talsept Ochre dry brushed, and on the left side here we have Codex Gray dry brushed. Now the White Dwarf is going with the Talsept Ochre. Now their rock formations are a little bit warmer. I'm going for a cooler color for my graveyard. I just wanted to see what both of them would look like. And this definitely looks, I mean, Talsept Ochre, I never would have considered using that. To me it's a little too yellow. But I thought I'd give the look of these two here. You should be completely finished now with base coating all of your rocks. And if you had an airbrush, that probably went all of 5 minutes for you. But for those of you using a brush like me, probably took you a couple hours. And I also went ahead and base coated the castle with the granite as well, just to save a little bit of a step later when we add the black and whatnots. Here's a closer view of the Talsept Ochre dry brushed, and I'll show you how to dry brush in a second here. Just give it a close-up, so hang in there. These terms are new to you, don't worry, I'll explain them. And then this is the Codex Gray dry brushed. Just go ahead and pick whatever kind of gray you want. If you want to go warmer, that's fine. Just add some brown or yellow, in this case with a Talsept Ochre, to your gray to warm it up, or stick with the cooler gray. It's really personal choice. Now I know in my last video I said I would try to update my videos once a week and not move too fast, but the terrain goes pretty fast, so yeah. I'm working on part 2 for the terrain. I'm just covering up this Talsept Ochre again with the Sheridan granite, because I wasn't happy with the ochre color. I just let that dry. Alright, so how does one go about dry brushing and getting kind of this look? Well, first you have to start with a cruddy brush. And this brush should be one that's well used and worn and, well, old and crappy, with the fibers and whatever all separated. You get just a little bit of paint on the brush, so say, well, that's a little bit more than I'd like. But you get some paint on the brush. Get yourself a paper towel. Wipe off most of that paint till you hardly see anything, any marks that it's making. Bring it over here, and you run that brush over your model. This will pick up all of the raised detail. It'll also give you a nice little texture along the side of the rocks. And you really, pound it on there. Don't be afraid. Now personally, I suck at dry brushing. I can do it decently well, but I don't know. To me, it just doesn't work with me all that great. However, it seems to work superbly with everyone else under the sun. And I've seen people who've never picked up a paintbrush before just go at it and come out with just stunning, absolutely wonderful, amazing results dry brushing. I think I do an okay job at it. Just want to try and get as much paint off of the brush as possible. And then just smack it on. That was probably a little bit too much paint. There we go. It's easy. You just bash these rocks with your brush. This is a crappy brush, so you don't have to worry about ruining it. This is why it's always good to have crap brushes on hand. You can buy really cheap brushes for this reason, and they'll serve you well. Again, just a little bit of paint on your brush. Wipe it off. Go back over here. And just go to town. I don't think I had enough paint on my brush that time. Let's get a little bit more. Ah! Too much paint that time. There we go. So you get the idea. You come up with a nice texture. You basically just don't want to see brush strokes. I have a little bit of brush strokage going on over here, which I'll fix with more layers of dry brushing. I mean, you can hear how hard I'm actually hitting the rock surface. Let's go a step ahead and try one of these skulls, which we're actually going to paint over a lot later, but just for the sake of funsies. And it might be hard to see in the video with the Codex gray how well this is all standing out and working. You'll see it better with the more successive lighter colors of gray. But you get the idea. It's pretty fun, and you can, watch a movie at the same time as you're doing this. And you don't have to be too careful with it. I mean, just really slap it on. And if you get some on the mast in the water, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to cover it later. So this is another easy, fun step. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or write a comment. You can also make a video of your progress if you'd like and link it or add it as a video response. I won't mind. Sorry that my light conflicts so much with filming, but I have a light directly above my workstation since the lighting in my house sucks so hard. If at any point you get too much paint on your surface, like, say like that, don't worry about it, just work it around. Nobody's gonna mind. And then we're going to be stippling some green moss on later. You're like, oh, stippling, what does that mean? Don't worry, we'll get there. It's almost like dry brushing. I always end up getting either too much paint or too little paint. That's my problem. And it's not really a problem, after all. You have a nice texture going on these rocks already. And if you want it a little bit brighter, just go back in and add a little bit more. And of course our next step is going to be more of the same, except using Fortress Gray, or just whiten up whatever gray you're currently using. Technically, for this stage you only really needed two colors, black and white. Oh my, that was a little too much. Oh well, no worries. And here, the terrain piece is completed, at least the first dry brushing stage. And the comparison to the one that hasn't been dry brushed yet. Excuse me. Trying to shoot some video. She's sleeping with her eyes open. Creepy. Alright, the next stage going to be using the Fortress Gray. Just doing the same thing. In my last snippet of video, you may have noticed somewhere in this area there's a dark mark on my poor first mate Muggsy. Poor Muggsy. Ends up, it was a big fat tick. Now, she has flea and tick medication on her, but when you live out in the woods, like we do, sometimes some of them get through. So I'm going to teach you a surefire way to get rid of a tick without using tweezers. Yes, yes, you're going to learn. So, all you need is a finger. Arrgh! Get rid of that tick. Make it walk the plank. Alright, so you have your tick, you have your finger, and you do a little something like this. Just like when you careen a ship and you're cleaning off the barnacles. You just spin that tick in circles and it gets dizzy or something, I don't know. Just stick with one direction and eventually it pops its own head out and everything. So there you have it. The tick comes right off. Head and all. No tweezers, no fear of getting the head stuck in there. And that's your educational lesson for today. Now let's get back to painting. Oh, our next dry brushing phase is Fortress Gray. Whew, pretty potent gray. You can definitely tell the difference from the first layer. Hopefully on the camera you can see the difference. So here's the finished second dry brush layer using the Fortress Gray. And side-by-side comparison. This one only has the original first dry brush layer with the Codex Gray. So you can kind of see how much it's lightened that up. And voila! Next thing I'm going to try to do here is use, originally I was going to go with the Space Wolves Gray as my edge highlighting. But it's a little bit too blue. A little bit too blue for my taste. The White Dwarf article suggested Astronomicon, which is a foundation paint. I only really like using foundation paints as foundations because of how thick they are. I'm going to play around with this. I'll try watering it down a little bit, but maybe I could go ahead and apply a straight edge on it. We'll see. The plan is not to water it down at first. I know it'll make the skulls really pop, so I'm going to be applying a little bit more gray onto the skulls, as well as the edge highlighting. We'll see how that goes. Alright, gone ahead and did this rock in here with straight Astronomicon Gray. Now normally, if this was like Space Marine armor, what I would do is get some paint on my brush, like so, and then pick out an edge, say right here, and of course my brush wouldn't be a crappy one like this. I'd be doing it with a slightly better brush, and do a little something like that. However, these being rocks, you don't have to get so precise. So just kind of have at it the way you've been doing the dry brushing, but with a focus on the edge. Don't worry too much if you get some of the paint in the crevice. We're going to make that stand out again in a little bit. And feel free to pick out little details. Anything to make the rocks look more rocky. Go ahead and dab a little bit too. Create some texture. Looks pretty awesome already. I also did this skull already. I'm going to do the second one. Wipe off some excess paint. Ooh, make it stand out. Yes. And we'll further lighten those skulls up with some pure white next. Do remember when you rinse your brushes, rinse them often. Don't allow paint to, again, that's with a better brush than this kind of brush, but rinse your brushes often and change the water out in your glass often. The more time you invest, usually the better it looks. Can't really go wrong with rocks, honestly. This brush has an annoying curly cue on it. And if your brush has annoying little things like that, try to work it into your designing somehow. You'll have to do some more texture work on these large, smooth plane areas just to make them look good and rocky. But you can see where I'm going with this. Now, before I forget, when you're working on a piece like this castle, do the dry brushing up into the castle just a little bit, like say right there. We're going to make it look as if the castle was carved right out of the rocks. So we're going to do a nice wet on wet blend once we get there. And again, when we get there, I'll talk about wet on wet blending and smoothing. Now, if you are going for a perfect edge highlight, like absolutely perfect, first you need a perfect brush. Now, I don't have a perfect brush right here at the moment. But you work the paint up about halfway up the bristle. And I think I showed this before, but I'll go over it again. I don't remember. My bloody memory. And then you just use the side. And like I said, this is what I like to do for Space Marine armor. Get a nice perfect edge this way, using the side of a very good brush. But again, we don't care about perfect, nice straight lines here. We just want rocky. But in case you were interested to know that little trick. Okay, on the right we have the Astronomicon edge highlighting done, and on the left we're still with the dry brush of Codex Gray. And here we are with a Fortress Gray dry brush on the left, and again on the right with the final highlight of Astronomicon Gray. Again, comparing the stages. Both of these little islands are completed now with the Codex Gray, Fortress Gray, and Astronomicon Gray. The last step we're going to do for now will be to add pure white to the skulls, which will also be done dry brushed. Get yourself a brush that's slightly better than what you've been using thus far, only because these skulls are on the small side. And just do enough white to make them pop. Focus around the eyes. You might need 2 coats per skull. You don't want to make them look like they're separate entities from the islands and rocks. Just make them stand out. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing in this video. I plan to take a trip over to the store and see if I can get a better tripod thingy for a more overhead view. There you go. They stand out just enough. So get to work, me hearties. Get all of your rocks done. And in the next video, we'll do some real fun stuff. With some washes and adding moss. The finer details. What are you still hanging around for? Get to work. I want to hear an aye aye, Captain. Aye aye, Captain.